Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll just get right to the point. The Missouri Statewide Independent Living Council has asked Pat Chambers to give a presentation on the state plan for independent living. The SILC agreed at our meeting last week to submit a technical change for an extension for the next year. ACL is asking all states to do that so that they can get their technology up and going for the next SPIL cycle. We wanted to ask Pat to come and give a presentation on the SPIL. Pat has been involved with a number of past SPILs. What would you say, Pat? 5, 6?
Yeah, I counted up, Karen. I think this is the 6th one.
Okay, so he has a lot of knowledge, and we're really excited for him to be able to share that with everybody new and give a refresher course for everybody who's more experienced. So without further ado, Pat, would you please take over?
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. It's nice to see some co-conspirators, for lack of a better word, but folks that have been on a lot of those SILC plannings, SPIL planning with me over many years. Ken McSorley is here. You know, I saw that Nancy Pope, and the three of us actually were frequently travelers to various SILC congresses around the country. You'll get a chance to ask Nancy about our escapades in Atlanta, Georgia, trying to find a steakhouse one night. Tammy, were you on that one too? We must have walked the entire city of Atlanta. Finally gave up. Bone Worry walked back towards the hotel, and there was a steakhouse across the street.
Yeah.
So, but I guess that we got cardio in that day, that's for sure. I thought it would be valuable to kind of talk a little bit, because there are some folks that are new to IL and new to their centers, to talk a little bit about the SILC. As Karen just said, Missouri Statewide Independent Living Council, MoSILC, but to do that, and of course, we all have our acronyms, so I'm going to incorporate the first part of this will be basically about the SILC, because the number one and the only assigned responsibility on a federal level for the State Independent Living Council is the SPIL, the State Plan for Independent Living. If you've got questions, then I'll try to make sure that I spell things out and not use acronyms right off the bat, but please feel free if you've got something to just put your hand up or wave, and we can go to do that. SILCs are required, a federal requirement, to be in all 50 states and United States provinces. In Missouri, a few years ago, I believe it was Governor Nixon, made a big effort to try to, when money was tight in those days, tried to eliminate a number of councils and state appointed commissions, including the SILC, but found out quickly that he could not, because it is a federal mandate to have that. So we have continued. The number of centers for independent living in a state can certainly vary. In Missouri, we have 22 federally appointed, federally recognized centers for independent living. That is, we are one of the higher ones. New York, the state of New York has a lot of councils. The state of Kansas, the last I knew, had 6. There are several situations that Tammy and I and Nancy found over the years that have 1, especially some of the smaller states on the East Coast, Delaware, New Hampshire. Some of those centers are, you know, they have 1 council, so 1 center, so it's kind of hard for them to have an independent living council, but they are required. Federal regulations state that council members can serve for 2 consecutive 3-year terms. Now, you can seek reappointment again after an absence of at least 1 year. SILC members are not recognized after 6 consecutive years. In Missouri, council appointees serve at the pleasure of the governor. I know of 1 former council member who served for 17 years and another for 12 years or longer. However, they were only recognized by the Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA, for the first 6 of those years. Some of you may be hearing RSA for the first time if you're new to IL. RSA had from the inception of centers had the federal oversight and monitoring for federally funded centers for independent living. In 2014, that changed from RSA to the Administration for Community Living, or ACL, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I served for 9 years, but resigned because the council was out of compliance. There have been numerous occasions when our SPIL, our state plan, was in jeopardy of being accepted by RSA or ACL because of the makeup of our council was not in compliance. That compliance is for a state independent living council that the council must be made up of no more than 49% of employees, state employees, or employees of a center for independent living. Council should strive for membership from all regions of the state and a diversity in membership of disabilities, minorities, and men and women. For many years, Missouri has had a great deal of difficulty with the governor in our state, and it's not just current governor past, but this has been an ongoing issue in Missouri for the governor making appointments to all state appointed councils. This is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. It's not just the SILC, the Governor's Council on Disability, all of the councils. When you wind up in various meetings, you're going to hear that all of the councils have had problems, and this goes back to the time that I got involved in the early 2000s. The Missouri SILC has been a 501c3 organization since 2001. From its inception in 2001 until approximately 2017, no SILC received, and Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, but about $35,000 to $36,000 a year of IL funding to operate the Independent Living Council. The 501c3 was not developed until approximately 2017, when we requested funding from VR to make the SILC autonomous from VR. That funding is now federal Part B funds passed through from federal money to VR, actually to DESE, to the state elementary and secondary education, and then on to the SILC. The amount now is about $73,000 a year. That change in funding source allows the SILC to hire an executive director and fund council expenses. Karen is the second of the executive directors since SILC developed that platform. One further explanation, under RSA, each state SILC was monitored by the State Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, which was their required designated state unit, or a DSU. When federal oversight was switched to ACL, states and provinces were given the opportunity to select state agencies other than VR for their monitoring if that other state agency agreed to do so. The term became then from, instead of state designated unit, to state designated entity, or designated state entity. In Missouri, thanks to our longtime VR IL director, Gary Mall, Missouri has had an excellent relationship with VR, so MoSILC did not seek to change our DSE. It was, the DSU was VR, and it continues now as our DSE. The State Plan for Independent Living, the SPIL, is, as I mentioned, the only federally mandated responsibility of the statewide Independent Living Council. It is the SILC's responsibility to create, implement, and monitor the SPIL. Now, if you've been around for any length of time, you're going to know that there are a lot of other responsibilities that are shared or are given to the SILC to work with not just Centers for Independent Living, but other entities that are involved in supporting and advocating for the disability community in that particular state. So please don't take this that is the only thing that the SILC does, because it is far from the case. State plans are normally a 3-year period based on the federal fiscal year. That is October 1 through September 30th. That has not been consistent since RSA was replaced in 2012 by ACL. The ACL was created with the intention of giving the disability community direct leadership on disability issues. What in reality wound up happening is that the majority of RSA administrative staff, and I will use the term bureaucrats, wound up being transferred from RSA and getting jobs in ACL. So unfortunately, we really haven't seen, I don't believe, in my opinion, haven't seen the renovation of people with disabilities having an opportunity to really voice their concerns on a federal level. But it is what it is. The timetable for enacting mandated changes from RSA to ACL has been delayed many times. Websites weren't changed over. Forms were not revised to disclose ACL instead of RSA. It's just been an ongoing process, one that I don't think really is still finished at this time. With oversight changing to ACL and the switch to the DSE, designated state entity, the DSE may or may not be involved in the development of SPIL, but they must sign off on the document. In a best case scenario, the SPIL committee should be an ongoing committee. It should be monitoring the progress being accomplished on the existing SPIL, and then approximately 18 months before the new SPIL is due for submission, begin working on the development of the new state plan for independent living. The state plan for independent living can consist of goals from the current SPIL that have not been accomplished and need to be continued. This is fairly common. Goals from the current SPIL that need to be revised, something that looked really good in theory and on paper, but once you tried to implement it in practicality, the way that it was worded to work just didn't pan out, and therefore you need to revise that goal. It can be accomplished goals from the current SPIL that need to be continued with additional goals or completely new goals. I was asked, probably more like voluntold, to join the SPIL committee when I first began attending SILC meetings from On My Own Incorporated in 2004-2005. During the past 20 years, the SILC has tried a number of different ways to gather feedback for potential goals. At various times, the SILC has asked council members to bring suggestions to the table, asked the centers to conduct consumer needs surveys to determine the most desirable goals. This has been solicited through SIL newsletters, consumer events staged throughout the respective SIL's catchment area, and/or SIL's participation at community events such as health fairs, home shows, senior center events, community coalition meetings, etc. The most successful event I think that I've been involved with was a few years ago when each center was asked to host and/or stage events with a feed them and they will come type of activity. At these events, the SILC had developed a standardized survey. So all 22 of us were asking the same questions. Now that format also included an opportunity and space where consumers that were coming to the event that were filling out a survey could provide additional goals, things that they felt that were not on the survey as it was printed. This gives them an opportunity for their voice. They're not just responding yes or no to predetermined goal ideas and goal suggestions, but everyone had a chance to voice their concerns because one individual's needs are completely different than another's. One part of the state may have different needs than another, according to their catchment area. So we wanted to try to be as inclusive with everyone getting an opportunity to voice what they felt that the SPIL needed to include. One of the important lessons that I learned on the SPIL several years ago came from the late Gary Mall. Gary was the IL director with VR for 26 years. The SILC Gary Mall Memorial Scholarship was established in his honor in 2006. That lesson is Don't paint yourself into a corner for failure of your SPIL by including too many specific objectives and action steps that may or may not be feasible. List fewer objectives with generic inclusive language. The more detail you include in the plan gives ACL more action steps to review. Failure to complete each and every one of those stated action steps will likely result in the ACL requiring a rewrite of the document, and in extreme cases could result in the withholding of federal funding. That has not happened in Missouri, but it has happened, I know, in some states, and one of those being Indiana. Again, Tammy and Nancy and I were at a Silk meeting, a Silk Congress meeting. I think it was in Atlanta, as a matter of fact, and there was almost, there was verbal altercations and almost got a little more heated than that between the state of Indiana and their DSU over monitoring. Okay, the SPIL time frame. Any questions so far? Let me slow down. Has anybody got any questions so far? Quiet group. Okay. The time frame for creating a state plan for independent living, the SPIL. While SPILs officially begin on October 1, which is the first date of a federal fiscal year, the SPIL must be completed several months ahead of that date. That is to be in time to be accepted by the SILC, because SILC has to vote on it, then have at least 51% of the SILs in the respective state or province sign off on the plan. So it means we have to have 12 of the 22 sign off here in Missouri. That document then has to be approved by the DSE, the designated state entity, VR, and then sent on to ACL for review and approval well before October 1. Only once has Missouri failed to have all 22 senators approve the SPIL, and that was with one senator voting no on the current SPIL, which took effect in October of 2020. The no vote was not because of the content of our SPIL, but was because of unfunded mandates that senators must pursue, such as transition, telephony, some of those things. So it was more of a no vote in principle than it was to what the content of our SPIL actually included. Failure to get ACL approval can result in the ACL withholding federal funds from the state. In Missouri, 9 of the 22 centers receive some form of federal funding. We have 4 Part C centers, which means that the majority of those centers' IL funding is received directly from the feds. Those Part C centers, we've got, I know at least 2 of them represented on the meeting here today. The Whole Person, Services for Independent Living, Disabled Citizens Alliance for Independence, and Paraquat. There are 5 additional centers that are Part B centers, meaning that some of their IL funding is federal funds passed through VR onto the respective center. And you would think after 25 years, I would know which those 5 are. I know that Empower Abilities is one. I believe Merrill is one. I don't know, Tammy, do you know off the top of your head? I'm putting her on the spot.
Sadie, let's see.
I can tell you in a second. So that would be
ILCMO, Sadie,
Merrill,
Merrill.
Sadie, Empowerability, TILC.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome, sir. Thanks, Tammy.
Okay. Monitoring the SPIL. And this is the ongoing, I alluded to that earlier, but this has perhaps been the most controversial part of the SPIL for some time. Over the years, this important aspect has been, as I said, controversial at times. Each center must report on their progress in your 704 report. It's nearly impossible to accurately report that information if you only track your progress once a year. VR, centers, and the SILC have had significant discussions frequently over many years on how frequently SPIL should be required to report their work on the ongoing goals of the SPIL. Several senators have objected to a quarterly update with their QSRs, arguing that this requires additional time from a staff member to complete an additional report. My personal opinion, and this is just me, but the data is much more accurate and will take far less time to collect if it is reported quarterly. Whether you sign off on the SPIL or not, and again, majority of us have always done that, it is still your responsibility, because democracy, that you have to support the goals and strive for fulfilling the goals of the state plan. I'm not sure where this stands today, but as I said, the SPIL has been a point of contention between senators and VR, especially during the years after Gary Mall retired, and between that time and the appointment of Elizabeth Smith as the IL director for VR. Elizabeth and now Lisa have worked very hard to reestablish the partnership between senators and vocational rehabilitation. So that's it. I hope this has created some awareness for those of you not familiar with MoSILC and the SPIL. The Missouri Silk and the State Plan for Independent Living both have vital roles in the independent living philosophy in our state. You and your center's partnership and participation in both are keys to its success. Again, I encourage you, if you don't attend the by Zoom, and that's maybe the one good thing that came out of the pandemic, is now we meet. It's much easier to meet virtually and not have to make a drive, for Tim Shaw and the people down in the Boot Hill, down in Kennett at Bales. That's a 6-hour drive each way for meeting. Up in St. Joe, Merrill, and in that part of the state, that's a 4-hour drive or longer to come in. Sometimes that's not real good if you're driving 4 or 6 hours one way for a 2 or 3 hour meeting. So we can take advantage of Zoom and other virtual meeting platforms to get that involved. But the Silk and the centers, and I know, and I'll say this for Karen, committees, they're not a lot. There's always at least one committee for every goal in the SPIL. And I know Karen is going to share the current SPIL that has 4 goals. This has been a little different because this SPIL is now being extended with minor modifications for the 2nd year. As I said early on, a SPIL is normally 3 years, and halfway through that, you start to plan that. Many years ago, David Robinson, who was the longtime executive director at the Whole Person in Kansas City, was one of those individuals that wanted to see the Silk or the SPIL committee and the Silk work on a year-round basis. And I think David was right. You don't know how to move forward if you don't know what you've been working on. You don't know what's worked, what has or hasn't been addressed. So it's very important that it be an ongoing, and as I said, it's just much easier if you're monitoring those goals and reporting on those on a quarterly basis than to try to go back and put together a year's worth of, well, I do this, I do that. It's emergency management or whatever. It's just much easier, much less time consuming to do that on a regular, ongoing basis than to try to stir the memories after a year, especially if you've had turnover. One person is responsible for your QSR for 704, and that person leaves, and there's not, good documentation. And I go back to IL 101. If it's not written, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. So it just makes the job a lot easier if you do that at least on a quarterly basis. Keep your notes and your documentation, whatever your data collection software base is. And that it takes, a couple of hours, a half a day at most, to do that instead of racking your brain. And you're going to be a lot more comprehensive and inclusive of everything that your center did in that time period instead of waiting for a longer period of time. What can I answer for anybody? What did somebody not understand? Did I go too fast?
Pat, I think there were some letters at the beginning. When you were talking, what was it? I didn't even write it down. I froze and got kicked out and then came back, but EAD, no, EDA, what was it?
Okay, you've got the DSE, it was DSU, and if you look up that definition, state designated unit, inclusive, and the definition of it, and I looked this up the other day when I was preparing this presentation, was the responsibility for oversight, for monitoring. Again, the whole purpose initially when RSA, Rehab Service Administration, was
RSA.
replaced by Administration for Community Living, was to give the disabled community more of a direct voice, especially in the administration, in the creation and implementation of policies for independent living. So that's when we switched it from designated state unit to designated state entity.
Okay.
That entity may or may not, as I say, may or may not be involved in the development of the SPIL, but they do, because if whoever your DSE is, they still have to sign off, accept it, they review it, and they have to sign off and go forward. Is that the acronyms you were
Yeah,
looking
yeah, that was. It would be really interesting. I'm a visual person, and I don't know if this exists anywhere, but if there was some kind of if anyone has seen a historical timeline, kind of how it's changed, some visuals might be nice as we train new people.
Okay.
I'll bet, and I did not go to the ACL website. As I said, it took a long time for that to happen, and delays, but you might go there. You can
look.
even maybe go back to Rehab Service Administration, RSA.
Yeah.
Their site is still up. It may have some of that historical perspective that you're thinking about.
Yeah. That helps me. I don't know anybody else, but
Deb, I will see what I can find.
yeah.
And if I find something that looks like it'll work, I'll send it to you. If we
Okay.
need to tweak it a little bit, we can work
Yeah.
on that. Pat, could you possibly give your email for the
Sure.
recording so as people listen to this?
I'll put it in the chat and do that.
Terrific.
Yeah,
I'm
Pat, can
gonna
you also
provide-
send out the board of directors for the SPIL and their names and phone numbers to me?
For the silk?
Michael, what are you referring to?
Isn't the SPIL governed by a board of directors?
No.
No?
It is governed, and it's governed by the SILK.
Okay,
So each member of the SILK, I guess that would be your board of directors, because they're a voting member. So that is, but it's not a separate entity or that. It's
I see.
SILK committee. The SPIL committee is part of, may or may not be SILK members. But the SILK itself has to approve the state plan. Redundancy there, but that's the case. So there, and I know that what Karen, isn't your current membership located on the SILK website?
Yes. And it is also on the governor's website for boards and commissions.
And for those of you that are not aware, it's real easy. The SILK website is real easy address. It's mosilk.org.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy to find, and there's a wealth of information that can be found on that site and attachments. State plans are there. It's a very good resource. If you haven't been there, if you're going to look for something, that's a good place to look. You have something else, Karen? I don't think I answered that.
No, those are the two locations where you can find them. Let me go ahead. I have a copy of the current SPIL that I can share real quick. It is also located on our website under state plans. Okay, can everyone see that? It says state plan for independent living.
Yep.
Okay. So this is what the SILK will be sending out to get signatures on from each of the centers. as Pat said, we have to have at least 12. Historically, Missouri's been very lucky that all of the centers, except the one time where we had one with a philosophical difference, sign off on the spills. And this is the kickoff. This meeting is the kickoff to our spill plan development. Our spill committee has a timeline to where we would like to be able to have the spill ready to be approved by the silk early next year and sent out to the centers and have signatures and turned into ACL, Administration for Community Living, by the end of June next year. The deadline is July 1st. So our plan is June 15th-ish in order to make any corrections that ACL might request. And that gives them from July until the 1st of October to approve the plan and get back with the state and say, get back with the silk and say, yes, it's approved. You may move on. As it shows, this shows just the title page of it. There's an executive summary with the 4 goals that the spill committee put together and was approved last time around by ACL, by the centers, and by the silk. Community integration, which breaks down into housing, employment, transportation, civic engagement, increasing civic engagement of persons with disability and promoting self-advocacy, increasing voter registration, educating self-advocates about how to serve on boards and commissions, and contacting SILs will reach out to contact their election commissions to offer resources on ADA compliance. Emergency preparedness, making sure that consumers are heard and seen during emergency preparedness activities in the state, excuse me. And then the 4th one is silk capacity, which is increasing the capacity of the silk. The spill contains objectives towards that. We have a detailed explanation and minimum funding for the SILs. Section 4 is the DSE response to their administrative responsibilities. So Lisa works on that. All the autonomy resource plan appointment process and staffing are in Section 5. Section 6 is legal certifications, and Section 7 provides DSE assurances and expresses the administrative role responsibilities of the DSE. Again, what Lisa and VR agree to. And then Section 8 is minimum compliance for operating the silk. So we go into Section 1, which again lays out the mission and goals to increase the community integration of people. And I won't go line by line, but as you can see, it gives goals and then how it is, how they are, we show that they're being met. So when you fill out those quarterly surveys, when we get information from you about, what are you doing with universal design? What are you doing? Is there a housing committee, advocacy day? All of those items, that's what it's, we're coming back to report on to say, yes, we are meeting these goals. Okay, so we've got the housing committee. And as you see, there's a number of items in here. And if you look, at least 10%, okay, this one has to do with employment. Competitive and integrated employment will increase for persons with disabilities in all corners of the state by 5% in this spill time period. And what Pat had said regarding not painting yourself into a corner was very helpful when this was being developed, because I know there was a number of people who wanted to, me included, wanted to make this a very large number, but in making it a smaller number, we were actually able to meet it and exceed it. So if we wanted to take a look at having these types of goals in the coming spill, we could say, yes, we did meet this. We went beyond it. Let's develop that a little further. So as you see, there's the employment pieces, public transportation, and this is all part of goal 1, which was community engagement. Because we all know that in order to have a community engagement, you have to have housing, you have to have employment, you have to be able to have transportation, to cover those items in order to move on. To the stimulate civic engagement of Missourians with disabilities and centers of independent living to result in increased inclusion and independence. Big, broad, very broad items. That could look like Warrensburg having a get out the vote day, or Heartland taking people to the Capitol for IL Day, or the whole person having an accessible voting location. So the way that those, like Pat said, they're very, very broad, so that they can be interpreted in creative ways for your community. And then it goes on to talk about educating policymakers. Well, let's face it, Mosul does that a lot. The centers in St. Louis and Kansas City have the opportunity to meet with new legislators during their visits across the state, their orientation visits. So those are really good opportunities for something that is basically the same goal. Emergency preparedness, again, that's something that everybody does. Everybody does that by having your CDS program has to have an emergency plan, has to. So that counts towards emergency preparedness. Now, some go beyond, some centers have more elaborate plans. Some centers have meetings with county officials to discuss what would happen with people who have disabilities during a tornado or a flood. So, oh, that one went the wrong way. Okay. So as we go through there, that's, and it's not only the consumers, it's also staff as well. Does your staff, do you have emergency plans in your center? And then goal 4 is increase the capacity of the statewide independent living council, which if you look, that's an item that the SILC handles. So you don't have to worry about that. As it goes on, it talks more about how what the goals are and how we evaluate those. Mike Parker, who is with us today, I'll go ahead and stop sharing this because then it gets more into the weeds. Okay. Stop share. So if you would take a look at that, it would, especially if you're a newer executive director, newer staff, you would take a look at that. That's what you would be signing off to extend for a year. And that's what we'll be asking you to do in the next few weeks. So are there any questions? Yes, Lisa. Lisa, I can't hear you.
You're still muted.
My camera is frozen, so I was trying to see if it could move. I apologize. I did actually, I went in and I looked at the IL outcome survey and then the consumer needs assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And I did have a question on that. So do those end up changing either to reflect the what would be the SPIL at that time, or has it been the same surveys?
Okay, I'm going to hand that off to Mike Parker. He is the SILC chair, but he is also the chair of the SPIL committee, and he handles a lot of the data. I'm still learning about that, so I'm going to hand that off to him. Mike?
Okay, I think we've had the same outcome survey. Um, for quite a few years. Now, when um, when I, when I was asked to, chair the SPIL committee, it was around this time of 2020, and we basically decided that that we need a new needs assessment, and that's what we are. That's what we are using now. I know there's been some talk and some thought to a new outcome survey, but um, um, but that's only been talked for right now. So.
Lisa, the short answer, and I think Mike got put on the spot there a little bit, not on purpose. I was there, but
Sorry.
Todd just I've done this. It should, yeah, you should have that. I mean, those are annual surveys that you're talking about. The SPIL should change every 3 years, so it should be, yes, it should be tweaked. And that's another reason that your SPIL committee should be an ongoing committee, not just meet when it gets ready to start building, start writing a new SPIL. It should be ongoing, again, monitor what's going on, and then making sure in your preparation, because if you have if your survey doesn't recognize the current goals of what you're doing, it's useless. I mean, you're collecting data that's spending a lot of time and effort that you're not, it's not vital to the report. So yeah, you should be every 3 years. That should be part of, what's ongoing.
Thank you. I wasn't going to ask, but now I'm glad I did. I was able to put a lot of information in. Pat, we miss you.
I miss everybody, believe me.
Okay. So I believe that unless there are further questions, I will have this recording up next week onto our website, along with some updated questionnaires that Mike has asked me to get on the website. I thought I would ask our website person to do it all at once, budgetary reasons. Tammy McSorley, hi, I'm going to put you on the spot too. You were involved with this for a number of years, and you're still part of the SPIL committee, which we appreciate. Do you have any items that maybe we may have missed in our presentation that you think are important to share with everyone?
That's a good question. I know just being a part of previous ones that it is a lot of work to do this. And Pat is right. When you go to look at what you want to put in the SPIL to make sure that you aren't putting too much in there that you have to, keep track of as far as measurability, because that is something that will be looked at. And I know we always try to keep it, as easy to track as possible. I'm just trying to think, as far as goals, I wasn't able to attend the last few SPIL congresses, so I wasn't sure what the latest trends were. But usually they always had good information as far as what what information to include in those. So another resource for that is ILRU. And they always put out, kind of some technical assistance for SPIL development. So, that might be something to take a look at as well.
And in going to the last Silk Congress that was it was in Little Rock this year, youth development and youth transition is the big hot topic right at the moment. And I know Lisa and I know Pat said in the past, there was some contention with VR and how the Silk was interacting with them. Lisa and I would dare say we consider ourselves counterparts. We work as a team. So we're trying to make sure that we're working in the best interest of the centers and for the people of the state of Missouri.
I think, Karen, that last part of your statement, bottom line is the most important. The goals, whether it's the SPIL, so whatever you're doing, it's to improve the quality of life for individuals with disabilities in the state of Missouri.
Correct.
So how we do that, and sometimes that gets lost
Mhm.
in exchanges or whatever, but that's the bottom line. That's what your center is for. That's what you're providing to the consumers, is that bridge, that outlet. And if you can keep that first and foremost in your mind, everything will be a lot more successful.
Exactly. So. Okay, well, I appreciate all of you coming, and I appreciate you sharing this webinar far and wide. If there are any questions, my email is, I will put it in the chat as well, is mosilk.ed@gmail.com, and the phone number is 816-226-8877. So thank you all very much. And I will go ahead and end the meeting.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Pat. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye, Mike.
Bye. Bye, have a good weekend.
You
Bye,
too, sir.
Barry. Bye, Lisa.
Bye, Karen.
Bye, Pat. All right. Marissa, glad you made it. I hope this helped.